And Rick called, and somebody said, "Hey, Vinny, Rick Derringer's on the phone." I went, "What? Rick Derringer? Holy shit!"
Very weird, that whole thing with Rick, because I spoke to him the day before he died.
From a phone call that launched a teenage drummer's career to a final conversation just hours before a rock legend passed away. These are the memories and stories of Rick Derringer, told by drumming legends and brothers Carmine and Vinny Appice. You'll hear first-hand stories from jam sessions with Jimi Hendrix to chart-chasing albums and arena tours. And please stick around to the end to hear about Carmine's final phone call with Rick, which took place just hours before he passed away. Before the albums and tours, before the rockstar collaborations, it started with a scene. In Carmine's case, the scene. New York City, late 1960s.
We met at the Steve Paul Scene. It was a club in New York. I met him when it was the McCoys joined up with Johnny Winter because of Steve Paul, who owned the Scene. And we used to go to the Scene all like 68, 67. Hendrix used to go there. Everybody went there. We'd have these wild jams with Hendrix and the guys from the Cream and the guys from Traffic and Rick and everybody would be down there jamming. So that's when I met him. And then we started touring with Cactus and Johnny Winter So the "and" was supposed to be, I found out on this interview, supposed to be Johnny Winter and the McCoys. But the McCoys were known as like a bubblegum group, and they didn't want to confuse people. So they just called it Johnny Winter and, because it was Rick, I believe, and his brother, and maybe the bass player too, And they just stuck Johnny Winter in there because Steve Paul was managing him. And through Johnny, then they got, he got a hold of Edgar, and then, he was in and out. And I played with Edgar for 2 years, and it was just like a close-knit stuff, back in the day. Everybody knew each other, and we all played gigs together. We all cut records, and then I've known Rick ever since.
While Carmine was lighting up the clubs, his younger brother Vinny was still a teenager in Brooklyn and about to get a call that would change everything.
I was at the Record Plant Studios with my band, which was a 9-piece band with full horn players. And we got a management deal with Record Plant Studios in New York City. So they gave us a rehearsal room to rehearse anytime. All our stuff was in there. It was like our clubhouse almost. So we were there a lot, almost every night during the week. And that's where we met John Lennon. We worked with Lennon a little bit. And then from there, we went into the studio with Jimi Iovine. He was our friend from Brooklyn, and he was producing us. So he was working on some recordings we did. And I guess Rick Derringer heard it. He was working there a couple of days and said, "Who's that drummer?" Says, "That's Carmine's little brother, Vinny." I was the little brother back then. So then I met him in the hall later on. It might have been that day or the next day. And he said, "Hey, man, I heard your stuff. It sounds good. And I'm putting a band together in a couple of months. Maybe we could hook up, check it out. Sound great." I said, "Okay." So I gave him my phone number, which my phone number was my parents' house. I was only 18, 17, 18. So still living at home. So about 4 months later, Rick called my mother's house. My mother answered, and he said, "Hey, this is Rick Derringer calling for Vinny Appice." He goes, "Oh, Rick, you must mean Carmine." "No, I'm calling for Vinny." "Oh, no, you must be calling for Carmine. He's, the older brother." And she insisted that. And then finally goes, "No, I'm calling for Vinny." So finally she gave him a number in Louisiana, because I was playing with a band called Axis in Louisiana. So I remember we were out doing something. We were outside. And Rick called, and somebody said, "Hey, Vinny, Rick Derringer's on the phone." I went, "What? Rick Derringer? Holy shit."
Soon, Vinny was in New York rehearsing with Rick and about to jump headfirst into the rock and roll touring circuit.
But we had a great time. It was so much fun working with Rick. And I must say, he's just such a professional, you know, with everything, in producing and songwriting and the whole bit. He was a great person to start a career from. He basically started my career, and him and Jimi Iovine. And and then when we went on the road later on, yeah, he would do a guitar solo, and every night was flawless, just so professional, bro. Just killed it every night. So the band developed and the band became really good, really tight. And we had the two guitar player thing. They used to do a guitar battle at the end, and people loved the band. It was really cool. He was a big brother figure, and also to me, it was like, this is fun, man. You go on the road, you can stay in hotels, and we used to double up on the rooms. Danny and Rick in one room, and me and Kenny Aronson on bass. He was in the room together. And to me, this was like, man, it doesn't get much better than this. Playing every night and meeting all these people, and we had packed houses. We had a lot of cool gigs. We opened, we co-headlined with Journey at the Agora Ballroom before Steve Perry, and Tom Petty was the opening act on one show or two shows. It was all this stuff. Then we opened for Boston, then we opened for Foghat, played in festivals, and then we went on to finally open for Aerosmith on the Rock Tour. So I was a kid, but I had eyes wide open to learn. Okay, this is how this works, and this is how this works. And Rick was a great teacher. I couldn't thank him enough.
Carmine himself joined forces with Rick multiple times for different projects over the years, and they made some serious noise.
And then me and Rick did our record there called DNA.
Yep.
And that record was happening. It was like all over the radio. We had a medium of heavy rotation on MTV, and it was called Derringer and Appice, and DNA was great. We had the cool picture on the front. We both looked like doctors. First song was Doctors of the Universe, and we had the video. We had, and then the label went out of business, and that was the end of that. And it was us and Joan Jett was on the same label, and we were both getting energy, so they took Joan Jett and left us behind. In looking at Rick's past, I had a lot to do with it. We did a lot of stuff together, and then I don't know, it was the early 2008, 6, something like that. My friend had a deal going with SPV Records, I think it was. They said, we want to do a record with you, and who would you do? Well, maybe Tim? He said, yeah, maybe Tim. What about Rick? I said, yeah, let's do it, Rick. So we did a record with me and Tim and Rick, and that was called Derringer Bogut Appice, or DBA.
Yep.
And we called the album Doing Business As, DBA. And we went in the studio in LA, and I believe that's when he started going a little Christian, But the record was a fantastic record. We had a great record. I mean, Rick was on fire.
Yeah.
Us together. And there's some video I just put on my Facebook of me, Rick, and Tim on that tour we did, playing BBA song called Lady.
Yeah.
And it was really on fire. And Tim and Rick are bouncing, playing each other, and they're bouncing, looking at each other and just bouncing, And it was great.
To Carmine and Vinny, Rick wasn't just a guitarist. He was a connector, someone that brought people together and made music that mattered.
I remember Rick as a great, great guitar player, very talented producer. I mean, when I started seeing all the stuff he did in a row, wow. I didn't know we played with Barbra Streisand. I remember he played with Steely Dan on a couple of tracks. And I remember all the stuff with the wrestlers, and he wrote the theme song for WWE. I mean, he did so many great things, so many great things.
He's just a master of all trades. He just did everything the right way, professionally, and play his ass off, and not many people could wear so many hats, production leader, songwriter, everything, So it was a great learning experience for me. Yeah, couldn't have been with somebody else. That it couldn't have been better with anybody else.
And then there was the final conversation, Carmine's last phone call with Rick just the day before he passed away.
Very weird, that whole thing with Rick, because I spoke to him the day before he died.
Oh, wow.
And we were talking about, because he's been sick, and we were talking about him ordering a new guitar, and I said, "You're going to get back playing again." And we did the song together. It was his song called The USA, and it was a really killer song. He never released it, and I played on it, and we were talking about that. I said, "Man, this is a perfect time for you to release this thing." And actually, it was the day before Memorial Day, and I talked to him. And, it was uppity. I've been talking to him over the last few months, all through his surgeries and all the stuff he's had in between him and talking to his wife. And at the beginning of it, she was real worried about he was going to die. So he said, pray for Rick, pray for Rick. And then he sounded better and better and better. And the last time I talked to him, finally, I said, you sound like Rick finally. And he was all energy. He had some energy. And then I find out he died the next day. I said, wow, how did that happen? So,
that must have been a heck of a shock for you then. Obviously, I spoke to him just 24 hours before, yeah.
I was a shock. I'm confused because usually he had a triple bypass. So usually when you have a triple bypass, all my friends that had it, I got Buddy Rich, I had two or three other friends that had it, and they all said they felt like they're 17 again, because all the arteries are clean. And I know he was in rehab for it, but he had diabetes, and I guess it complicated everything. But I was surprised, totally surprised.
And if you've got a favourite Rick Derringer track or memory or moment, then please do leave it in the comments. Let's keep his legacy alive. And if you want to hear a tribute that I recorded with Rick's manager and friend Ken Mutino, then please check out the link right here.